They were less rigorous about making sure that marketing expenditure was performance only, which is a lesson I simply can't shout loudly enough. And I'll come back to that when we talk about cash flow in a moment. And the exec team as well, just by way of example, there were 3 reasonably senior people on the venture-backed side, and there were 2 roughly equally expensive but senior people on the Screen Select side. So when you add that lot up, you get to a radically different footprint in costs. And considering that the sort of funds we both had to play with at one point in that 12 months was about £2 million, that makes a very material difference on your ability to fund the business and break even. The other thing I want to talk about is the importance of focus and the importance on getting your metrics right. And it's a long time ago, so I think I'm not causing too much offence with this chart. But I think I fished out the chart from a genuine management pack that I had from the time of the of that merger in 2004, and this I think is quite a good example of how not to do it. So this was a slide in a real management pack entitled "Continued Focus on Core Metrics." Not a bad title. I like a continued focus on core metrics. I would not tend to expect such a slide to be slide 50 in a management pack. And if anybody can really spot what the core metrics are on this page, or more importantly, how we're doing against our targets and plan, then they've got better eyesight than me, and I've got the best glasses money can buy. The equivalent slide about 6 months later, after all of our integration, was this slide here, and it's a genuine actual slide, this one, and the points to note. First of all, it's slide 7. Secondly, it's got 8 metrics on it. Thirdly, it's pretty clear about what the forecast stroke budget was and what we actually delivered, and in fact it even color codes which ones we're doing well on, which ones we're doing badly on. So the point of my slide isn't to talk about which particular metrics we were using. The point is to say, picking the metrics that matter and that really track the growth of your business and managing very tightly against them and getting the entire business very aware of what they are, how we're doing, and asking for the entire business to help you in tracking against them is critical. And as I look at the differences in the way that Screen Select had been managed and the way that Video Island's team had been managed, that was a very big part of the reason why the race had unfolded as I showed you a moment ago. I thought I'd just show people finally, as I finish on bootstrapping, a selection of the quotes I got from the chief execs of the rest of the businesses I'm working with at the moment, and so these are real live quotes from people I really respect as expert bootstrappers in the current environment. I'm sure most of these points will be familiar to most people here, but if you're a commercial property landlord at the moment, hands up, any of them? Good, because you're in a very, very bad place, and everybody in this building ought to be able to exploit really the fact that the commercial landlords are on their knees at the moment, and that's a big fixed cost for most of you here, and is something you can now in this market do a lot about. The other advice I want to highlight here is the R&D tax credit stuff. Again, most people should be onto this. Your accountants, your finance guys will know this, but it can make a real difference, and it is essentially free money from the government, and that's something to be applauded. But I'm not going to dwell on all these others. I've got plenty of other slides to get through. So let's move on to my second question, which is how was it that cash flow beat money? And what I want to start with here is this was our original thinking. This is a slide I wrote a very, very long time ago, but it could have come from any of the businesses in the DVD rental sector, including Netflix in the US. And this was our original thinking. And our original thinking was essentially that when you take our DVD rental subscriber, you have to pay for that subscriber, a number, for the sake of argument, like £20 up front. You then have to provide that subscriber with DVDs. And DVDs will cost you, those DVDs you're going to send out are going to cost you something approaching 30 quid. So you are initially, on the blue line here, about 60 quid out of pocket. And then you get a monthly contribution from that subscriber. They're paying you maybe 15 quid a month, and you're making 5 or 6 profit off that each month. And so gradually you start digging yourself out of that hole, and after about 9 months, you expect to have recouped your costs of the DVD library and the marketing, and then any time you keep a customer after 9 months, and we initially started keeping customers for about 16 months, you are making money. And that was our original thinking. That was very much the way the industry worked. But Netflix had raised about $200 million based on this type of thinking, and they didn't break even for 3 or 4 years, very much as this sort of model would have predicted. It took me probably about 3 years until, with the help of one of our venture firms, we actually really understood the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation is much better than we anticipated. What happens in DVD rental is that you typically give a customer a 2-week free trial. So I've started my timeline at -2 here. This is weeks into the membership. And yes, you get that customer, and you at that point owe somebody some money, most likely, for bringing you that customer, and you've got to get them DVDs. But you don't have to pay for those DVDs. And you don't have to pay for that marketing at that point. And you are actually, you've got very few cash costs for the first couple of weeks while you're shipping those DVDs to them. You've got you've got some postage costs, but you haven't got very much. And then 2 weeks later, assuming that customer converts into a paying subscriber, bingo, they've paid you £15, so including some money which isn't yours, which is the VAT that you owe the government. So actually you go up quite fast, and then you continue to service the customer, and that costs you a tiny bit of money. Then one of those early bills falls due and you have to pay it, and that pushes you very slightly under. And then next thing you know, the customer's paying you again. You've got another £12, £15, including VAT. And actually, in the case where, on the blue line here represents the average, but in the green line's case, which is where the payment you're making to your partner for the customer is a revenue share, so instead of maybe £15 up front, it's maybe £1 a month for the next 15 months. Actually, you never go underwater again. So on that green line, you can see I dipped into the red very briefly on week 3, but thereafter I'm up. Which means that effectively, when I'm growing quickly, if I can grow on the revenue share model, my customers are actually providing me with funding. There's a lot to be said for that. And what happened over the sort of 2 years probably after we'd figured this out was we managed very aggressively this curve. And we're using something here which Dell probably make the biggest song and dance about, and it's managing your cash conversion cycle. And in effect, that's about tracking how many days does it take between when you get money in and when you pay money out. And what we were able to do here, so on the summary on the left-hand slide, we were growing, the black line at the bottom represents our revenue growth during that period. So we grew by about a factor of 2 in this time period. Now, conventional textbook thinking, our original thinking, everybody's thinking, was that when you're growing by a factor of 2 in a fairly short timescale, you need a lot of money to do that, because you've got to buy all these DVDs, you've got to buy all the marketing. And actually what happened was, if you look at the bars, the red bars, that represents our cash cycle, and we increased it from about 40 days to about 80 days, which, putting it another way, if you look at the red line, the red dots, meant our working capital moved from £1 million in our favour to £5.5 million in our favour, which essentially meant we were receiving £4.5 million worth of funding, real cold hard cash, from our customers. There's a heck of a lot to be said for that. And that saved us 30 or 40% worth of dilution and a lot of time and effort and a lot of distraction. And it's for that reason, really, that we were able to carry on sailing when the LoveFilm rival of ours had sort of ground to a halt. And they were sitting there, they hadn't figured this out. So for them, growth did represent a requirement for funding, and their deep-pocketed backer was proving didn't want to keep dipping his hand in his pocket, so they effectively stalled for about 12 months while we were able to deploy this sort of trick against them, and it meant we were, as you saw on that earlier graph, we were able to grow. We almost doubled over a period when they were roughly flat.